I'm a great believer in imitation, because I think that when you have been moved by something, you must try to acquire it for yourself. It'll come out differently when it's been really digested.
Through the gestation period.
But I was a great monkey as a young fellow.
Weren't we
I
all?
admired and adored 4 or 5 pianists that I'll never forget as long as I live.
Who?
And I imitated them to beat the band.
Who?
Well, there was Rachmaninoff, whom I absolutely adored. Well, I adored all of them. Arthur Rubinstein, I think he was the first one where I really had a mature emotional reaction as a pianist, hearing him play the Tchaikovsky piano concerto. I was 11 years old. But a particular grandeur and a nobility about his way of playing, and of course the music was the first time I'd heard that piece, curiously enough. And thereafter, for months and months, I would listen to his records and play along with them, with all the little things that he did, and Chopin and all that music that he plays so divinely. Well, and then there, of course, I came to my professor and teacher with whom I studied, and that was Rudolf Serkin, whom I immediately emulated in every possible way. I would go to his concerts and insist immediately on learning whatever piece it was that he played. And it wasn't that I wanted to play it the way he played it. That wasn't it. It's just that I just had to have it. I had to have everything that I heard at that time from everybody that impressed me. I left out Vladimir Horowitz, who was another one who made me run home to the piano and wanted to see what I could do, and not the least of them at all. And perhaps the last one among the pianists that I had a tremendous admiration for, and who had a definite, important influence on my life, was Arthur Schnabel. At that time I was somewhat older and was less imitative, although I still absorbed a great deal from him. Now, among these pianists, only one actually was my teacher.
Serkin.
But during the time that I was studying with him, I was emulating all of them, taking from all of them. It's something that I didn't realize that I was doing at the time, but I realize now.
Isn't that basically what any really first-rate musical talent does? That he opens up all the pores, mentally and physically, and absorbs as much as he can, and finally at the end, hopefully, if he's to be an artist, he puts this all together into something that comes out as his own.
Well,
that is not imitative of any of them.
I don't think you can help that.
But an amalgam of all these things, which, for want of a better word, can be called a musical culture.
Yes, absolutely, I agree. There's no way there. I think that we should talk about that a bit more, only because I think there are people that feel that fear of being overwhelmed by a personality, a fear of imitation of something that they like, for fear that their true selves will not come out. But I believe that learning, as Socrates, I think, said, is all recollection. And that when you've been moved by something, it's something that is already within yourself, that has been brought up, that you've been somewhere primordially reminded of. And that's why you're moved in the first place. And to stifle that, to say, no, I'm afraid of that because that's so great, but that's not for me. I've seen so many people in regard, particularly with Casals, who, my goodness, how I mimicked and imitated him and tried to do what he did on the piano. So many others, so many little things that I would love to do. little goodies that the inimitable Jascha Heifetz did on the violin. Singers, Caruso, all these things. I wanted to do everything to bring that into my. I wanted to be all these people, and without fear of not being myself. And I think that was a very healthy and right. That was a right instinct. And I think people should not be afraid of
Being influenced.
being influenced, and not only being influenced, but acquiring in every possible way.
It was curious when you said that, when you were talking about that primordial instinct, that these, it's kind almost a déjà vu experience that one goes through. And the thought of Casals crossed my mind, because there is nothing similar in a real sense in the actual physical playing that I do as he does. And yet, for me, from the time I first met him in 1950, you knew him before, which we'll come to
No,
later on,
not really. No, not
was
much
more or
before.
less was the strongest and most important part of it was a reaffirmation of what I believed in, as if one tentatively tried or believed in something. And here was a man saying, yes, that is the way it has to be.
That was my experience too with him. That was my experience too.
How did you meet him?
Well, the same way you did.
No, but you had gone to Prague before
Well,
the
yes,
festival.
but we had both been asked to participate in that first festival. The only difference was that I was in France a month earlier, and I couldn't resist the temptation of going down there to
be with him.
Not so much to be with him. I was very skeptical. I was very skeptical because he was already a legend in a way. He hadn't played, and I was very young, and I wanted to see really whether he was such a great man, in quotes, as he was reputed to be, and whether, I wanted to have my own impression from my young, thinking myself, know-it-all self at the time. And I went down there and was, I think I wrote him a note saying that I'd like to come, and received a note back by practically the next morning after I sent the letter to please come immediately, and I did. And it was unforgettable experience that first time because of his complete disingenuousness, his utter absolute simplicity, modesty. And he asked me to play for him, and I was too frightened underneath my somewhat sure appearing exterior. I was really afraid to play for him. So instead of doing that, I asked him if he wouldn't play four hands on the piano with me. Hopefully, sort of that way, I would see whether he could stand the way I played anything at all if we played together. And we did play some piece of Schumann's for four-hand. And then I got up the courage to play a Bach Toccata and Fugue for him. And he was very sweet. And then he went and got his cello and played the D minor entire suite of Bach for me. Well, I needn't tell you what that experience was, to have him sit right in front of me, and there he was, and it appeared to me as if he was wrapped in an aureole, in a halo of light. Probably the reflection of his glasses, but it was something that I shall never forget as long as I live. In spite of all the hundreds of times we played together, and all the unforgettable experiences that I've had with him and through him, and that first one will remain.
Those are the memories that we made. I think one should also say for the record that if not for the insistence, the absolute belief and endless enthusiasm of Alexander Schneider, of Sasha,
Well,
Casals would perhaps have been lost to this generation.
I don't think there's any doubt about that. There's no doubt
He
about
owes
it.
his resuscitation directly to Sasha.
Absolutely, absolutely. Who is himself a great musician, as we know. But
We're digressing
We're not-
now.
yeah.
But getting back to the study of music. You began at the piano, and then your natural talent took on its own direction to a degree.
Yes. knew very, very early, indeed, probably because of these confirmations. I felt that I belonged being a musician. I belonged being a musician, but it took me many years of playing in public. I probably, for my state, I was precocious in many ways. In other ways, I was underdeveloped, so to speak. So when the shock of beginning my career and playing very early, as I did with great orchestras and great conductors and with success and so forth, I really wasn't ready for that experience, and I had to pay a price for it, of many years of searching and anguish and anxiety and displeasure with my work, some of which I still live with today. But that's the natural and quite unpredictable evolution of every artist. Each one has to go through his trial and ordeal.
And those that make it become artists, and the others,
Well,
that's the sad truth of our
in a way, if
of
there
our
isn't a struggle,
craft.
if there isn't a struggle at all times, I wonder whether there can be art or whether there can be life without
Yeah.
struggle.